Okay, thank you so much for having me this morning. My name is Änna Ibrahim. And I like to, especially when I do these talks at faith communities, to talk a little bit about myself and what brought me to my work, because it was certainly through a faith lens that I wound up at Shalom Farms. I am from the Midwest. I'm from Minnesota originally. I'm the granddaughter of two farmers on each side. On my mom's side, my grandfather was a fourth generation farmer in North Dakota, and he grew conventional crops, so wheat, soybeans, sugar beets, and I spent every summer there from the time I was born to when I graduated college. Actually, was probably the last time I didn't go there every single summer. So I grew up in and amongst farmers and in and amongst small towns in the Midwest. On my dad's side, my grandfather is from Bisan, Palestine, what is now Beit Shan, Israel. He fled in 1948, but he came from a long line of olive tree, lemon tree, and banana farmers. And when I was in middle school, he came to live with us in the United States, and he built a giant garden in our backyard. And so too, more immediately spending time with my jadot out in our backyard garden also fostered a love of food, a love of growing, and a love of just being in the dirt, because dirt therapy is good for all of us. And so I really held that close as part of my sort of upbringing and identity, but certainly wasn't going to do anything with it in terms of a career. I grew up in an evangelical and Muslim household, so I was baptized Lutheran. My mom was non-denominational growing up, and my dad was a practicing Muslim. He converted to Christianity while I was in college, so my household is now very different than it was when I was growing up. But that sort of multi-faith perspective really informed how I went about my work and my passions and sort of how I viewed the world. I went to a Methodist college in Minnesota. It was the college that my great-grandmother had gone to, and that my aunt had gone to, and that my mother had gone to. And I pursued Middle Eastern studies. I lived in Israel for a year in East Jerusalem, studying both Judaism and Islam and Christianity, studying Arabic and studying Hebrew, and again, really just digging into a multi-faith perspective. I thought I was going to work on the Mideast peace crisis. I'll tell you one thing, even then, it was 2010. Being out there, I was like, this problem is not mine to solve. I felt very American in that moment. So I came home and was like, we have plenty of our own problems to work on, and I'm going to do that. I joined the Lutheran Volunteer Corps, which is like AmeriCorps, but through a lens of spirituality. You live in community for a year, and I got placed at a direct service organization called Bread for the City. That organization had been founded by a group of Catholics, Presbyterians, Methodists, Lutherans, and a Jewish congregation. And they did all the social services you could think of in a city: medical, dental, vision, social services, legal services, and food. And so I was the person who managed the volunteers, which meant I got to do all of those things because volunteers did all of those things. And I became very passionate about the food program in particular. We had an orchard that was growing food at the time. We were doing rooftop gardens. It was this big moment for fresh food and the importance of it in folks' lives. And I sort of reconnected with those farming roots. And then I decided that direct service wasn't effective enough, and I went into policy because I was like, that's where real change happens. But I went into policy with a multi-faith perspective again. So it was an organization that worked with faith leaders across the faith spectrum to advocate for the policies that were important to them at their local level and also at the federal level. So we worked on things like harm reduction. We worked on things like gun control. We worked on things like immigration in states like Ohio and Florida and North Carolina, and also federally working on healthcare. And that was wonderful and also exhausting. And so my husband and I moved to Richmond with the idea that we were going to invest in our local community. It was important to us to be a part of a place where we could put down roots and where we could really see our work being an impact in the lives of our neighbors and vice versa, right? And so I found Shalom Farms by happenstance. It really feels like a gift that I found this organization, that this organization found me, and that I've been able to be a part of their work for the last couple of years. So I joined in the summer of 2022. I am now in year 2. I live in the north side of Richmond and very much love my neighborhood there. And my husband and I bought a house. We got married in that house, and we just welcomed our first baby. He is 10 months old. His name is Moses. And I will say that I really do feel like the part where we're putting down roots is real, and that feels special. And Shalom Farms is a big part of that. So at Shalom Farms, we're all about growing food and growing community. So this is our mission statement. We are a nonprofit farm and food justice organization working for an equitable food system in Richmond, Virginia. We have 2 production farms, dozens of partners, and an innovative food access program. We grow and distribute over 600,000 servings of certified naturally grown produce every year. And our guiding principles balance individual and systems-based approaches to addressing food access disparities. What we believe is that helping individuals overcome the existing barriers to healthy eating, forming strong community relationships, and building a food system in which those barriers no longer exist is the most important thing to do. So that is our mission. There's lots of terminology in there: food justice, certified naturally grown, equitable food systems. We'll talk about all of that as we go through this presentation. So where we work and why. This is a redlining map of the city of Richmond. Redlining is not unique to Richmond, but we're in Richmond, so this is our map. This is from 1924. So this is where HUD helped decide where we would systematically divest from particular neighborhoods and where we would invest in other neighborhoods. And this was a very racially coded map. White areas, black areas, white areas were invested in, black areas were divested from. If you were to lay over a 2021 map of where there are grocery stores and where there are not grocery stores in Richmond today, it is essentially the same map. The divestment that happened 100 years ago is still impacting our city now, and that is the work that Shalom Farms is focused on. So you have probably heard the term food desert. This idea that when there are no grocery stores in a neighborhood, it's a desert, a place that is devoid of access to food, and in particular, fresh, healthy food. And that is a term that lots of folks use, and it is a fine term to use, but there is a larger conversation happening about whether or not it's the most accurate way to describe what is happening in our neighborhoods and our communities. And so I have this short video here from Malik Yakini. He is a longtime food access advocate and expert, and it's just a 3-minute video that helps explain a little bit about the difference between food desert, food apartheid, which is another phrase that has begun to be used in the last few years, and this concept of food justice, which just helps frame a little bit how Shalom Farms goes about its work as well. So I'm gonna hit play and hope the audio works.
I grew up in the city of Detroit in the 1960s. And while I was growing up, there were lots of folks in the city who had moved to Detroit from the South beginning in the 1920s, including my grandparents on both sides. There were grocery stores almost everywhere in the city. There was a national chain grocer within walking distance of every location inside the city of Detroit. That all changed by 2007 when Farmer Jack, the last of those national chain groceries, closed its doors and Detroit became labeled as a food desert. The USDA defines a food desert as a low-income census tract where a substantial number or share of residents has low access to supermarket or local grocery stores. There's multiple problems with the term food desert. One of the problems is that typically people think of a desert as a very barren landscape, and the reality is that a desert is actually a very vibrant ecosystem. Another problem with the definitions used of food deserts is that it presupposes that the answer to these areas that lack access to healthy food is more grocery stores. A third problem with the term food deserts is that it's not a term that people living in those areas use to describe their own situation. It's similar to the term at-risk child used in schools. I was a school principal for several years and never heard a parent come to me and say, "This is my son John, he's an at-risk child." This is a term which is imposed upon communities as opposed to a term that community members use to define their own condition. The fourth and perhaps most problematic issue with the term food desert is that it doesn't speak to the intentionality of the conditions that exist in communities that have low access to healthy foods. The reality is that public policy and economic practices have created these areas that have low access to foods. And food desert does not speak to that intentionality. Recently, the term food apartheid has resonated with myself and other food activists. Dara Cooper defines food apartheid as the systemic destruction of Black self-determination to control our food, including land, resource theft, and discrimination. A hypersaturation of destructive foods and predatory marketing, and a blatantly discriminatory corporate-controlled food system that results in our communities suffering from some of the highest rates of heart disease and diabetes of all times. Many tend to use the term food desert. However, food apartheid, according to Dar, is a much more accurate representation of the structural, racialized inequities perpetuated through our current food system. Whatever term we use to describe the situation, there are vast inequities in the American food system that are caused by historical, intentional, racist, and classist policies, resulting in far too many Black and brown and poor white people not having sufficient access to fresh, healthy, high nutrient dense, affordable food. I join with those who say that such access is a human right, and that denying that right in one of the wealthiest nations in the world is unconscionable.
Okay, so there's no right or wrong way to describe what is happening necessarily, but more to just like broaden our perspective to understand the larger conversation that is going on, so that when we find ourselves learning about these issues or helping with these issues in some way, engaging, volunteering, donating, whatever it may be, that we have just a little bit more perspective on the conversation at large and where various folks might come in to that conversation. So food desert is still used by the USDA. Food apartheid is used by some activists, but not all of them, because not everybody in a neighborhood would know what you were talking about if you said food apartheid, right? And so this is a conversation that often happens at the policy level and then like trickles down to the grassroots. And our work at Shalom Farms is about the grassroots and interacting with our neighbors and our community. But this is just a helpful way to think about some of the larger conversation that is going on. So we call ourselves a farm and food justice organization. What does that mean to us? I think about food justice across 4 lenses. So land, access to good fresh food, workers and treating your workers well. Farm workers are historically some of the lowest paid folks in our country. And self-determination, this idea that you should be able to decide for yourself where your food comes from in your community, whether that be from the grocery stores that you want on your block or the farmers that you want to support with your dollar, that you get to decide where your food comes from and who you support in getting that food. So Shalom Farms thinks about sustainability across all 4 of these avenues, and I'll talk about each one sort of in the framing of our programming.
I grew up in the city of Detroit in the
No. There we go. Our farms. So we have 2 farms. One of them, which is the one folks might know more about because it came first, is the one in Powhatan. That is a 14-acre farm. We're growing on about 6 acres of that farm. And then the second farm is our North Side farm. This one is off Brook Road, off of Westwood Avenue. So it's in the heart of the city. It is a 5-acre farm. We're growing on 2.5 acres of that farm currently. Neither farm is owned by Shalom Farms. Both farms are leased to us very generously. The one in Powhatan by a developer, a local developer, and the one in Northside by Union Presbyterian Seminary. So that is their land. We share that space with Yopon Place, which is a park that the seminary runs. And so it's a really cool, our development director calls it Narnia because it's sort of hidden behind Westwood Avenue. But when you go out there, you see this big, green, gorgeous working farm, and then there's a path and a park. It's a really lovely space sort of in the heart of the city. So certified naturally grown, what does that mean? It's basically all the things that you would think of when you think of what organic produce is. It's all the same practices, using low or no till, making sure that you have healthy soil, rotating your crops so that you don't tire out the land, using good water practices. We just don't pay for the fancy certified organic sticker because it's expensive, and the USDA requires quite a lot of data collection that we just don't have the capacity for. So certified naturally grown is an alternative way of certifying that you're using regenerative sustainable agriculture practices, and it's done on a peer-to-peer farming network. So 4 or 5 of our peer farmers, they're all for-profit farms because there aren't as many nonprofit farms in the area, but they will come out, review our practices, see our data collection, and say, yes, you are doing what you were saying you were doing. They'll do that every 2 years, so we're on an off cycle. We just did Northside, we'll do Powhatan next year. And then we do the same for them and their farms. And so that is that certification process. It means that you're getting incredibly nutrient dense, sustainably grown produce that's certified by your local farmers. We believe at Shalom Farms that we have a responsibility to take care of our environment. So we use farming practices that promote the health of our air, soil, water, and know that we produce nutrient dense food. So when we think about food justice and sustainability of the land, this is how we make that investment. It's not always the most affordable way to farm. It's certainly not always the most easy in terms of labor way to farm, but it is the way that protects the land for the long term. And so that is the way that we choose to farm both of our farm sites. The other piece of this is that we think about educating our larger community so that everyone can be good stewards of the land and also understand what the land gives to us. So we have an education program, a K through 12 education program where the field trip subject matches the SOLs for Virginia for that grade. So a teacher can pair a learning module with coming out to the farm with their class. If they're in the first grade or second grade, they might learn about pollinators or parts of the plant. If they're in middle school, they might be learning about nutrition. If they're in high school, they might be learning about food systems or food justice. So we have a different curriculum for every grade level. They come out to the farm. They usually just do a tour of the full farm site. If they're little, they're doing taste testings of things in our demo gardens. And it really is incredible. You know, a lot of kids see their food from their grocery store shelf, or they just see it from a frozen bag of peas, right? They don't know peas come in a pod or that carrots come out of the ground. They haven't seen it happen. And so it's just a cool experience to see folks sort of fall in love with not just like the taste of the food, which is fun, but how the food actually gets here. So our program, so we grow all this produce. We grow over 200,000 pounds of produce every single year. And then we need to get it out to folks. And we do that in a handful of ways. The primary way we distribute our produce is through our mobile market program. So these are farmers markets, essentially. We run them Tuesday through Saturday. We run them in neighborhoods that we saw on that map that have been historically divested from. So in Richmond, that's the north side, that's the south side, and that's the east end. We run 2 to 3 markets a day in each of those neighborhoods for an hour or 2 hours each. And we will bring all of the produce we grow. So it's seasonal. We start the last week of April, and we have the markets all the way through the second week of December. And folks come to shop. We used to primarily be in public housing developments, the idea being that we would absolutely reach folks who needed it if we placed our markets there. The problem was we were in public housing developments at 1 or 2 p.m. or at 11 in the morning, and we know, yes, there are certainly people on benefits who are available and are ready to shop at 11 in the morning, but we also know there are working families, folks who are in school, et cetera, who we weren't catching, who also need access to affordable fresh food. And so we have pulled a handful of our markets out of those developments, not entirely because a handful of them were senior homes, and it's a really great way to reach our senior population. But we've pulled a handful of them out to more public places like the Sarah Garland Jones Center, the Broad Rock Public Library, Broad Rock Elementary, places where we know we're going to reach some of those working families, some of those students, some of that larger public who are not living in public housing but still need access to affordable food. Or subsidized housing. And part of the concern in doing that at the time was this idea that then like regular folks, people who could afford more expensive produce would find us there, and then we would not be reaching the people who needed it the most. And what we decided was like, no, that's okay. We all need places as a community where we can gather. And it's all right if folks find us at the library or at the Sarah Garland Jones Center or at the YMCA. And if they want to support the work, they can pay a higher price and pay it forward to their neighbor. So we piloted a tiered pricing system last season where if you needed the produce to be affordable, great, we still kept it at an affordable rate. If you were willing and able to pay a little bit more, and we had a little explainer on like how you think about generational wealth and earned income, if you felt like you were a supporter, you could pay a little bit more and know that you were subsidizing the cost for other folks and paying it forward. The way that we price our produce is that we look at annual index that is a bunch of data that's submitted by farmers across the state. It's essentially what you would see. They submit what they think a pound of blueberries should be worth given their labor costs, material costs, etc. State aggregates that data and comes up with an average, and those are the prices that you would often see at your regular farmer's market. We take that price, we say, cool, that's the supporter price. We discount it by 50%. That's our member price, our affordable price. And then Virginia has a program called SNAP. Virginia has a program called Virginia Fresh Match, which is through SNAP EBT benefits. And so if you're using your EBT benefits, you get 50% off of all fresh food, which essentially means folks are getting farmers market quality produce at 25% of the cost you would see at your regular farmers market, which is really, really cool to see. What that looks like in real life is a pound of spinach for 75 cents. It's 4 tomatoes for 50 cents. So it's really great high quality food at a low, low price. And those markets, I think there'll be about 500 and some this season alone. The other thing we do at those markets is we will partner with other local farmers to offer things that we don't offer but that are in demand for our customers. For example, eggs. We don't have chickens, and I will not let us get chickens no matter what anyone asks or says. Don't put any ideas into anyone's head, no chickens. But we can partner with a local farmer. In this case, it's a local Black and Indigenous farmer on the Eastern Shore who does have chickens and eggs. And so we buy those wholesale and are able to pass on the wholesale price or a subsidized price to our membership, and they're able to get high quality farm fresh eggs. We do that with honey, we do it with jam. We do it with some things that we don't grow. For example, cherry tomatoes we get from a local Black farmer who farms in the East End. So it just depends, but the idea is that we can also invest in our local farm economy. We don't want to compete, but we do want to be a good partner to those folks as well. So these are just some pictures of what it looks like at the mobile market. That one is a pandemic picture, so folks have masks on, but if you look at that bottom one, it's kind of what it looks like. We no longer use that big truck because it felt kind of just like too big and unapproachable, so we have little sprinter vans. We set up a tent, we set up tables, there's crates of fruits and vegetables, and folks can just shop that market. So the other way we get it out is through our Produce RX program. This is partnering with clinical partners. So we work with Bon Secours, we work with certain programs within VCU, the Massey Cancer Center, the Ryan White program. And these are cohorts of folks who are working with their clinical partner around some sort of diet-related illness, whether it be diabetes or high blood pressure. We provide weekly bags of produce to them, and we provide food skills education classes. So the clinical provider is providing nutritional information, they're measuring A1C levels, blood sugar levels, whatever it may be, while we, on the other side, make sure folks get fresh produce every week and make sure that they get an opportunity to see how they can use that fresh produce in meals for themselves throughout the week. Those cohorts can be anywhere from 4 weeks to 12 weeks long. We often hand out free kitchen supplies as part of it. So if we're using something that requires a whisk, we'll make sure that you get a whisk because maybe that's not something that's in your normal kitchen repertoire. And the idea with those cooking classes is not only incorporating fresh and healthy food into a meal, because a lot of people have long-standing traditions around family recipes and incorporating lots of fresh food into their meals. But it's laborious. It's like, yes, I know how to cook that thing, but it takes 4 hours, right? And so our goal is to provide recipes that are fast, that are 20, 30 minutes, that incorporate the fresh produce, and if they incorporate other ingredients, those are ingredients that are easy to find in people's neighborhoods. So for example, I said I live in the North Side. I live in the less fancy part of North Side. So the closest grocery store to me where I live is a Dollar Tree and a Dollar General. They're both about 2 blocks away. And they do sell groceries, and they certainly sell quite a few canned goods. And now we have a mobile market that runs out of the North Side, North Ave Public Library. So if somebody wanted to make, for example, one of our cooking classes recently was a curry. So it was peppers and onions and garlic from the farm. Jason, our chef, sauteed those. And then it was garbanzo beans. You can find a can of garbanzo beans at the local Dollar Tree for $1. So that's an easy thing to say, like, yeah, throw this into your recipe. It's definitely accessible in your neighborhood. And then it was Ben's minute rice, because his point was, if you don't feel like cooking rice over the stove, it can take a long time. Or if you don't have a rice cooker, or if this is what's easiest for you to buy and get, it's okay to use minute rice. It's not the worst thing in the world. You're still getting a healthy meal. And then he gifted everybody some curry powder, because that's actually a very difficult thing to find at a Dollar Tree or a Dollar General. And so making sure that folks go home with like a little something extra that's going to make their recipes taste even better is part of the goal as well. So that's the Produce RX program and the cooking classes. We also do those classes sometimes as just community classes. So we'll do them at like Peter Paul, or we'll do in partnership with the Children's Museum, like a parent, guardian, child cooking demo thing. So they're mostly with our clinical partners, but we also do some community ones as well. And that's what that looks like. That is Jason, our chef. And we do like food demos at the mobile market, so folks can try stuff with the produce that's being sold at the market while they're there. We also are sharing our farm space this year with the RVA Black Farmers Market. So they run their farmers market out of the Northside Farm every other Sunday. All their vendors come. It's really, really cool. And Jason does a cooking demo during the market every other Sunday. And then you can, eat the food. Last time he did veggie burgers, so it was like a whole meal. I was like, all right. It's delicious. And then nutrition distribution. So anything that doesn't sell at mobile market, our whole goal is that folks get food right to their door fresh as quickly as possible. And so if it doesn't sell at the mobile market, we will then donate it to one of our community partners who has a food pantry that's happening within the next day to hand out through their food pantry or cooked meal program. So this is just some of who those folks are: Atlee Church, Belmont, Matt RVA Community Fridges. So it's a combination of faith communities and community organizations. And so we make sure, really, like, this is part of our sustainability model, that there is as little waste as possible. And so if it doesn't sell that day, it's going to a food pantry partner that day. Anything that folks get from Shalom Farms should be, and is generally, harvested that same day or the day that you're getting it the day after. So you're never getting a piece of produce that's been sitting somewhere for several days. And that's part of our relationship with Feed More. We used to just donate directly to Feed More, but Feed More has a huge operation, and so things would have to sit for a while as they sorted through things. And so instead now we work directly with people, with organizations that are Feed More partners, for them to just come and get their produce immediately. But Feed More still pays Shalom Farms for that. And it means that the Feed More partner is getting everything that they need, and we can still work closely with Feed More as a partner as well. Volunteers make it happen. So I talked to you a little bit about food justice in terms of workers and workers' rights. I come from Minnesota. The minimum wage for an agriculture worker in Minnesota up until a few years ago was $5 an hour. It's one of the most underinvested in jobs, and it's one of the things we need the most, right? We're talking about food. And so at Shalom Farms, we work really hard to make sure that we're paying our staff fairly and well. We have a team of 20. Half those folks are on the farm every single day. It's hard work. And we would not be able to do what we do, to grow as much as we grow, to farm as much as we farm, to get it out in the ways that we do without the help of volunteers. That is a major way that we're able to support our staff. We have 5,000 volunteers come through every single year. Yes. And a good handful of those, about 120, actually come every single week and work a shift at the farm. We call them our lead volunteers, or a shift at the mobile market. So they're there from 9 to noon every Monday. Some of them work multiple shifts on the farms, multiple shifts at the mobile markets. So we have a crew of dedicated folks who basically act like staff to help make sure that our programming can happen and that we can grow what we need to grow. So We also have schools and many, many church groups. Shalom Farms was founded by Methodists, and so we have a long history with the faith community here in Richmond. Many, many large church groups that come out and help us do some of the bigger projects that need more hands. Corporate partners, families, and individuals can just sign up and come to the farm for just a day. And we love that. It's a great way for folks to see the farm and get exposed a little bit to what we're doing. So, but yeah, 5,000 all in all, and we literally would not exist without them. So there are just some pictures. They look like they're having fun because I promise you they are. We work really hard to make sure that our volunteers have a good time while they're on the farm. No minute is wasted. And there's definitely lots of opportunities for breaks and water and all of that good stuff. But yeah, that's a combination, I think, of Northside and Powhatan volunteers you're seeing there. Okay, so this last piece of food justice. So we talked about our land, we talked about how we give access to fresh produce, we talked about our workers, and then this piece about self-determination. So this idea that a community gets to help decide, determine where their food comes from and how they access the food that they want to access. So one of the ways that we think about this is through our farm space. We have a small amount of space at one of our farms that we offer as incubator space to just beginning farmers. As they're figuring it out, land is extremely expensive. It's hard to get access to. And so offering what we have as a free resource to somebody else when we're not using it feels like an easy way to resource share and help support self-determination for folks who live in the community, in our neighborhood, who may want to be growing their own food. Resource sharing. So we started a list either this year or last year, sort of a pilot list, going out to small farmers in the area saying like, what, if anything, do you need? What would be helpful to you, to see if any of that was stuff that we just had and could share. And one of the main things we heard was like starts for plants. Like if we ever had excess starts, that would be a great thing to share. And we grow 10 to 20% excess on anything that we start in our greenhouse. And so this past season, when we had extras, we just sent out an email to say, hey, this stuff is at the greenhouse, first come, first serve, and all of it got taken. It was super, super useful. So it's like an easy lift that helps, support other farmers. And so we're just looking for, this year we're sort of revising that survey and seeing if there's other ways that we can be supportive, but that's been sort of a pilot this year that's been really successful. The farmer partnerships I talked about, working with other farmers. Another thing that we do at the farm sites is we really make sure that we're thinking about what we're growing being culturally appropriate for the folks that we're growing for. So a perfect example is when Shalom Farms first started out, we grew one variety of pepper. We grew bell peppers. We now grow 17 varieties of peppers because there's a huge Latina community here in Richmond that's come over the last decade, and there's a demand for a larger variety of peppers, so that is what we grow. Community partnerships, we could not do what we do without working in partnership with all of the organizations you saw listed on our slide deck and many more I did not mention. We really see ourselves as a slice of an ecosystem with a role to play, but everybody has a role to play and we cannot do it without one another. This is the issue of food access, the issue of sustainability is not something that is solved by one organization or one group of people. And so we're very grateful to be working in partnership with so many folks across the city, with so many individuals who support us. Really know that Shalom Farms exists because this community wants it to, and that's important to us, that we're here because folks are invested in the work that we're doing, and that they have said that it's important that we continue to do it. So what next? We're about to start year 3 of a 3-year strategic plan, so we'll be going back into a strategic planning session. We're really excited about our Northside farm in particular. It's a farm that's on the bus line. It's a farm that's easily accessible by lots of folks within the city. We held our second open house event there this summer, and we saw over 500 people at the farm, which was amazing and wild and just really, really cool. And so the idea is investing in that farm site so that we can do more events like that help the public and expose the public to some of the work that's being done. We just got funded to build a community pavilion out there with an outdoor community kitchen. So that'll be cool space where we can do cooking demonstrations, where we can host events, where other folks can use that space for what's important to them. So also taking ideas, we're doing quite a bit. So sometimes folks say things and I'm like, oh my gosh, no, like the chickens. Oh my gosh, no. But this is an exciting time for us as an organization. I think we really feel like we found sort of our beat, our groove, our place in this work. And we're just excited to keep going and keep growing. So that is us. If you are interested in any way in getting involved, you can volunteer at one of the farms or one of the mobile markets. There are one-off volunteer opportunities. We have lots of events and workshops. Right now we're running an October workshop series. Last week was beekeeping. This week is pickling. And I think there's 2 more. They were running every Saturday at our Northside farm. Offers of goods or services. We have lots of folks that help us with our website design or with some data crunching and collection, that sort of thing. Can sponsor an event. We host 3 events throughout the year. We have our Savor Shalom event in the spring, which is a long table dinner, really beautiful 5-course meal, wine pairings. The open house event, which is a big open to the public event, farm tours. We invite all of our partner organizations so folks can get a sense of all the work that's happening throughout the city. And there's music and raffles and fun stuff like that. And then coming up, we have our Fall Harvest Festival. So that is on Wednesday, October 30th. It's from 4 to 7. Would love to see any and all of you there. It really is to just celebrate the end of the season. There's s'mores, there's bonfires, there's soup. There's a suggested donation, but it's free to attend, and it's a cool way to check out the Northside Farm in particular. And then spread the word, When I first moved to Richmond, I would wear my Shalom Farms shirt, and people would come up to me and they'd be like, Shalom Farms, I love Shalom Farms. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's so great. What do you love about us? And they'd be like, it's a farm. That's just so great, which is great, brand recognition is good. But being able to, for folks being able to understand a little bit more of what we do is the goal. So thank you all for having me this morning. This is an excellent way to spread the word. And if you all have any questions, I'm happy to answer any and all of those. And if you want any contact information, that's your slide. But thanks.
So we have about 15 minutes.
Perfect.
So what's your major source of funding? Donations?
Yes, as a nonprofit, we do have some earned revenue because of the mobile market. It's about $115,000 a year, and our budget is about $1.5 million. So the earned revenue is a very small percentage of our total revenue. Of that 1.4-ish million then that we're talking about 40% is individual philanthropy, individual donors. 40% are grants, regional grants, family grants. And then there's probably 10% that is corporate sponsorship money, and then a small slice that is events and event revenue. Yeah.
Could you talk about the little neighborhood markets that are in these areas where people do their shopping and the unhealthy food that they're buying?
Yeah, like for example, like I said, my neighborhood, there are plenty of corner stores, right? And Shalom Farms actually had a program for a little while called the Healthy Corner Stores Initiative, where we would stock those corner stores with our produce. But the problem was, 1, they weren't really designed to store it long term as a corner store. And 2, folks weren't coming into a corner store looking for fresh produce. So when they encountered it, they weren't buying it. It's like, I didn't come to this corner store for an onion. I came to this corner store for a bag of chips or a 6-pack or whatever it is you go to your corner store for, right? So it's a little bit of like a chicken and the egg thing, right? These corner stores, a lot of these owners are like, yeah, absolutely, let's get some fresh food in here. But if that's not what folks are looking for when they go there, it's not going to be successful, right? And so what we're really talking about is a change both in expectations and in the behaviors of the store and the consumer at the store. And I mean, folks have low expectations because their neighborhoods do not reflect all of the things that they'd like to see in their neighborhood. There was a sort of like healthy foods grocery store that was down the street in my neighborhood, but they couldn't afford to keep regular hours because it was expensive to run the store. And so that meant every time I tried to go there, it was closed, right? And so like you quit trying to go to your healthy store if it's always closed. And so those are some of the challenges that you're seeing in neighborhoods where there aren't great grocery stores. Is like, it's not just as simple as dropping a grocery store in there or as your corner store having healthy food. There's a whole shift that needs to happen, and each player has a role in that. So yeah, what you see in a corner store is all the stuff you'd expect to see in a corner store. It's, sometimes it's like pancake mix, which is helpful, but it's a lot of, junk food and frozen food and beer, really, yeah.
And baking stuff.
Are you seeing a difference and you feel like you're really reaching some of your goals?
Yeah, I think that's the part, it's like food insecurity in Richmond is close to 15% within the city of Richmond proper, which is where we work. And that number has not gone down significantly. And we know that folks' benefits have only decreased post-pandemic. So food has gotten more expensive. What folks have to spend on food has gotten lower and lower. And so it can feel like you're beating your head against a wall in terms of solving a problem. But I think that what we have seen is the change in habits, the change in demand, right? The food at our mobile market is in high demand. People are coming out. We sell out of everything. We sell out of kale, we sell out of collards, we sell out of peppers, we sell out of zucchini, we sell out of squash, right? So we know that it's not, I think for a while the conversation, when I first started working in food, the conversation was like, we got to introduce people to healthy food. We got to make sure it's in our food pantries. We got to make sure fresh produce is in our food pantries. That's not really the conversation anymore. There's a high demand for high quality food. It's where to find it at a price that's affordable for folks. And so I think we've made a dent in terms of what folks know they want for their families, for their bodies. And now it's just making sure it remains attainable by everybody.
And the second people come back.
Yes, we have, right. We always are counting like unique customers, but we have so many more returning customers. Our percentage is around 85% of returning folks to the mobile markets. And I'm sure our food pantry partners would say something similar. And the comments that our food pantry partners get about having fresh produce in those grocery bags they hand out, I mean, people are just thrilled, And often, when you're working with food banks, you get whatever folks deliver, and so the fresh produce count is like a bunch of cilantro. There's only so much cilantro you can use in a meal. And so the variety, it's not just the quality, it's also the variety of produce folks are getting is huge. Yeah.
Do y'all grow a lot of herbs or do you mainly grow?
We mainly grow produce just from a space perspective, but we do grow herbs because people want herbs. So we grow cilantro, we grow parsley, we grow basil, we grow mint. I mean, who can't grow mint, but we grow mint. Yeah, and I think we do some oregano and some thyme. So yes, yeah. Certainly not at the same volume, but we do grow it. Mm-hmm.
So your farms are leased,
Yes.
and I can understand that's probably a very stable relationship, but you mentioned developer.
Yeah,
And
you caught that.
So are you, as part of your strategic plan, are you looking at a way to actually purchase land to set up a more sustainable situation?
Yep. Yes. So there's so many things baked into there, but one of the challenges with the Powhatan farm site in particular is that it's owned by a developer who's lovely and has been letting us use this land for free for a very long time, but at some point as a developer we'll need to develop that land. And so we've invested quite a bit in that farm site, and we don't think it's fiscally responsible to invest much more in that farm site in that way. Our relationship with Union Presbyterian Seminary is just more mission aligned in terms of the green space, in terms of the work that they do. Both farms have long leases attached to them, 10-year leases attached to them. We've talked a lot internally about finding a farm site that we would purchase and own. Or, there's lots of different purchasing options. Folks can put things under an easement. They can, let you use it for 99 plus years. Will they get a tax break? There are other things that can be done. The issue from our standpoint is these are all donor resources, right? And these are donor resources that folks want spent directly in people's lives. And so saying like, we're gonna take $500,000 if we were lucky, but probably much more than that, to just buy the land is a hard sell, especially when we have strong partners who are willing to lease to us for essentially free. So right now it's more of an internal conversation about reserves and having the option over time, but leaning into the partnerships that we have to get what we need to do done. Yeah.
Are you currently looking for more?
No, no, that's one of the questions we get all the time. It's like, do you want another farm? And I'm like, we're barely running two. No. But there are lots of great organizations that work with individuals and faith communities in particular. There's land trust, so the agrarian commons, and then there's also a faith agrarian commons. So if folks have land that they want put to good use that they are no longer using, there is a way to get that land into folks who will farm it and farm it for social causes, while also providing tax credits or some sort of tax break. So we're not in the business of collecting any more land, but there are certainly places that are, because land access is such a huge issue in this movement. So, yeah.
Are there any other similar organizations in nearby communities, like up to Lynchburg or Hampton Roads?
So I know of two that are, nobody is doing exactly the same thing, but I know of two that are adjacent. One right here in Richmond is Happily Natural. The farmer's name is Duran Chavis, and he runs an urban orchard and farm on the south side. His programming is different. He does a lot more educational programming for youth and folks who want to learn how to urban farm. But he is running a nonprofit urban farm in the city. And then there's another one whose name I'm not going to remember, and who's, I think, either north or south of the city. They're a little bit more rural, but I think it's a seminary program that is running a farm.
Sophia Farms.
Yes, Sophia Farms. That's it. Yeah.
Mark Biddle, he just got through teaching our class.
Oh, okay, cool.
So,
Yeah.
Sophia Farms.
Yes, Sophia Farms, and I know they work with some nonprofits in the city or right outside the city in some of their programming as well. So those are two that I think are like adjacent, but nobody is doing exactly the same thing. And I think in terms of production, our production is quite high comparatively, which was an intentional choice in terms of folks before me who founded the organization saying that primarily we will be a production-based farm. For a long time, Shalom Farms just grew food for Feed More. And it's only in the last probably 8 or 9 years that they've developed their own programming and distribution system.
Other than fundraising, which is always a constant, what are some of your other biggest challenges?
Yeah, I would say, like obviously fundraising, but folks, it's very easy to talk about Shalom Farms within Richmond. I think folks get it pretty quickly. I think internally the big challenges really are like the operational toll of what we do. This is work that's very hard on people's bodies, that takes a lot of dedicated people, and making sure that we can afford those people and have enough of those people, and honestly have the bench of experience so that we know the work can continue, has been our biggest challenge, I think. You talk about succession planning, and it's like our bench is just not that deep, because either historically we have not paid people well enough for them to stick around, or the people who have stuck around did it for a long time with not a lot of pay and they're tired. And so I think like when I think about sort of the future security of the organization, I'm always thinking about, will we have a deep enough bench with the expertise we need for the work to continue? That's a big, big challenge. And then I think like the land security and what that means for how we choose to invest donor resources always tugs at me. It would be great if we had a 30-year lease or a 40-year lease, or land that we knew was ours to use, because we're spending money to invest in the infrastructure of 2 farms on space where we might need to take it all back at some point. And that feels just not wise in the long term. So.
You mentioned that the Methodist Church started this organization. Is it locally, the local Methodist Church, or how did that?
Yeah, specifically it was the Methodist Conference, the one that now they're all combined, but originally the one that was based here in Richmond. They had a mission that was actually off of Brooklyn Park Boulevard in the north side. I think it was called Bethany House or something like that. They sold that building. Their idea was that they were going to transfer that mission into some sort of affordable housing initiative. It was 2008, and so it no longer was a good idea to do anything related to housing. And so they pivoted to this idea of urban agriculture, being like, there was a moment there, because I was a part of it, where everyone was very into fresh food. Michelle Obama was growing a garden at the White House, and everybody was like, yes, fresh food is what we need to do. And so they had land at Westview on the James, which was another Methodist project. And so they started an acre out there with the idea that, like, we'll just grow fresh food, we'll have plenty of volunteers in our Methodist congregation, and then we will give it to Feed More. And so that is how it started. It spun off into its own organization, no longer officially affiliated with the Methodist Church, I think around the time they moved to Powhatan. But we still, have deep connections to that community in terms of our volunteer base and our supporter base, but no longer officially affiliated with the Methodist Conference.
Do you do anything with crossover up here?
Yes, so last year we piloted with their prenatal clinic on the south side. We piloted vouchers to expectant moms to come shop the mobile market. They were like $5 or $10 vouchers where you could come to the market and get that much produce for free. The amount of produce you can get for $10 at our market is staggering. I normally have a photo, I forgot to bring it, but it's quite a lot of food. So we've done that with them. Part of the challenge with partnering with Crossover is a lot of their services are now outside the city, and a lot of their target population actually lives outside the city because costs and prices have pushed them outside the city. So
But they've got 2 clinics.
they have this one on the south side, which is, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One on the south side that is to the city.
Yes. So that's,
Population
yes, so that's the work that we did with the south side
there.
clinic.
Hispanic, but-
Yes.
And, but yeah, but I was thinking when you were, I'm a retired cardiologist. So I was thinking when you were talking about the healthcare connections you have with the ECU
Yep.
and with Bon Secours, that there are also some direct connections between VCU and Crossover, particularly through the cardiology. I don't know if you know the history of Crossover, but they've had a lot of involvement with the VCU cardiology and cardiac surgery.
Yes. And I met with the ED of Crossover last summer. So we were talking about some of how all of this comes to be, because my knowledge of Richmond is new, and man, is everything small and connected, and I just learn more and more every single day. But yes, the challenge was when we had that conversation was lots of their services had moved out, but they still have this Southside clinic. So we piloted this voucher program, and I don't know if we continued it this year, if we tried something different, but we are experimenting with different things with local community clinics as well. So not just VCU and Bon Secours, but places like Crossover, places like Daily Planet, and there's one more that I'm not remembering off of Broad Street right now the name of. But yeah, certainly opportunities there, and sometimes more than we can do. But we are expanding.
I volunteer at Crossover.
Oh, okay.
Anything that I can.
Yeah, make some connections. Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is we are expanding our Produce RX program next year to create bigger cohorts with folks from multiple clinical programs. So it's not just one clinical partner, it's our cohort with multiple ones. So it would be fun to talk, because it would be great if we could get some of the Crossover folks in those cohorts getting access to this weekly produce. And those are going to be 3-month cohorts, so they'll be much longer in terms of impact. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.